I am still just a regular Swami in the order, so that's good news. At least
Yeah. Well,
for the moment, I'm just a Swami on a long leash.
mm,
All right. Well, we're on chapter 10 of the Imitation of Christ by Thomas A Kempis, and in book three. So book three is titled Interior Conversation, and chapter 10 is titled On the Joy of Serving God and Abandoning the World. Right on. Let's go. The disciple says, I will speak to you again, O Lord, for I cannot be silent. I will say in your hearing, my God and my King, who is in heaven, how great is your goodness, O Lord, which you have stored up for those who respect you. What then are you to those who love you and serve you with all of their heart? Truly, it is the indescribable sweetness of contemplation which you give to those who love you. In this, you have shown the tenderness of your charity, that when I had no being, you made me. And when I strayed away from you, you brought me back again to serve you and commanded me to love you. Probably change that word to inspired me to love you.
this reminds me of an old Alan Watts talk where he was talking about, where, or in the Bible where it commands you to love God. And he's like, you can't command people to love
and
God.
there's and there's there's it really, yeah, I mean, because it is a common ideal in Christianity, this command to love.
Well, I think it's misunderstood because oddly
Yes.
enough, I was thinking about this today. It's not a commandment. It's telling you what has to happen in order for you to reach it. But it's not like an order. It's telling you kind of like a symptom or a sign, I think, of you're on the right path.
Yeah, well, absolutely. It ignores a lot of things. One, it presumes that you would have to be commanded to love God. That it also makes God kind of, I can't even imagine a being of that magnitude who would command something lower than itself to love them. That just gives him a very weird, a very odd character. And I really feel like it's what Ramakrishna, said when the Brahmo Samaj was talking one time, and their minister said that we have to sweeten God with our devotion, and Ramakrishna was like, "What?"
How are you going to sweeten sugar,
Yeah, Ramakrishna was like, he is talking like someone who knows nothing of the Lord. And this brings that to mind, that you've commanded me to love you. It's like, if you're anywhere within a universe's distance from the Lord, love is fully available and fully to be inspired in you as you draw near to that unconditioned compassion, that deep wisdom, that complete lack of any thought of selfishness. And so, but really, it's just this wonderful idea, though, how great God's goodness is. He's drawing our attention to that, and to those, that even if you just turn toward Him, He has this wonderful goodness. How much more is that if you actually love? If you actually open your heart to the divine. And this is one of those things. It's kind of unfortunate that in the beginning of our spiritual life, so much of it is of the practice is pretend. It's like imagine God and imagine seeing God and imagine all of that. And it makes it very tempting to kind of write it off as a fairy tale, or to feel like, oh, this is child's play in a way. Because it takes a lot of tenacity to push through that period, and until you touch, and not in a huge supernatural realization sort of way, but just in that gentle relationship way, to actually feel that love begin to grow and experience that presence within ourselves. That just as you clear your mind, as you thin the thickness of your ego, because ego and the veil of Maya, they're synonyms. They're the same thing. And as that egoism begins to thin, the experience of God begins to grow in equal measure. to that thinness, and you become more and more aware of that inner bliss, the ananda of your nature. And just that, just being in that, for the path of devotion, for being in that relationship with the beloved, with the divine, it is its own reward. And to love God is to love love, and that's how the ego diminishes in that relationship, because you're loving love, and of course naturally you're going to love love for its own sake. It's a natural progression. We're not being asked to add or do something on top of what we are. We're just simply being reminded of what it's like to be what we are. That when we come to that natural state of being, that Satchitananda, that all of this happens. None of it's effort. It's all effortless. It's all smooth. It's relaxing into your true nature. It's not a driving of accomplishment. Truly, it is the indescribable sweetness of contemplation which you give to those who love you. In this, you have shown the tenderness of your charity. And when I had no being, you made me. And when I strayed away from you, you brought me back again to serve you and inspired me to love you. O fountain of love eternal, what shall I say to you? How can I forget you? Who have condescended to remember me, even when I was on the verge of being lost because of my sin? You have shown me your mercy beyond all of my hope, and restored me to your grace and friendship far beyond anything that I deserved. What return can I make to you for so great a favor? And there it is. That is the engine of devotion right there. What return can I make to you for so great a favor? This is why we meditate on the grace of the divine. This is why we meditate on the ideal of an unconditioned love. And that is the work, believe it or not, of spiritual life. Spiritual life is trying to get your mouth opened wide enough to accept the grace of God, to accept an unconditioned love. Because in this world, we'll never see it. There is no such thing as unconditioned love in this world. Even a puppy you have to feed. So there's no unconditioned love in this world. And so it is a matter of faith. And that's the faith that's important. That's the faith that we really need to have, a faith in an unconditioned love that allows us. That's why the path of devotion is so effective. In Jnana, the other paths, you have to maintain all of that purity, because you're doing the work, and the universe is kind of this non-existent illusory thing that you're overcoming, and you're backing into it by not this, not this, not this, not identifying with anything. And the mind has to really be tuned to a very high pitch of purity for that to be effective. And you have to be able to maintain that through life in the world, which is extremely difficult. But with devotion, Ramakrishna says that high pitch of purity is not as important, because we're in relationship. Love covers it. Grace covers it. You see, because what we have to do, the reason for that purity is to get the tumbler of the mind to line up so that we can detach. We can pull our identity out of the mind. We can sit and observe it. The mind has our karma, and the mind won't let you go. The mind will hold you to your story, and you can't just decide, I'm just going to, pull back, because it's a mechanism. It's the karma mechanism that keeps you locked into mind, keeps you identified with your body, keeps you held into this narrative that you're living. And so you either have to purify that, remove that me and mine through a very arduous task of discernment and renunciation, or as a bhakta, as a devotee, you're inspired into that through love. And through faith in that love, the mind lets go of you. Through faith in that grace, the tumblers of your karma will align and allow you to separate from the mind. Will allow you to pull out and end the story, stop the story. and to live in the moment, in the presence, and let that be an inspiration to you, where that love really kicks in and colors your moment, colors it with what it actually is, an experience of love. And so this is really beautiful just to hear him saying here. Just I'll read this whole section again. It's just wonderful to meditate on. And this is the thing that doesn't make sense. The very previous sentence, he says, "You commanded me to love you." And now he's describing God as, "O fountain of love eternal." That God is this fountain of love. Well, you don't have to be commanded to love a fountain of love. Somebody who gives that freely and that abundantly. He says, "O fountain of love eternal, what shall I say to you?" It's that matter of just sitting there, just struck. You don't feel the need to say anything. There is really nothing to say. You just sit there in silence. Swami Damodarananda used to talk about Ramana Maharshi having that sort of atmosphere, that when you went in and sat in his presence, you had no desire to talk. You had no desire to ask questions. You just felt no trouble in yourself at all. You were completely just content and at peace to be in that presence. And this is the divine. This is the beloved. O fountain of eternal love, what shall I say to you? How can I forget you? Right? So even then we see that the remembrance of God, which is so difficult for us at the beginning, actually becomes our nature, as we progress, as ego thins. How can I forget you? You're showering these blessings. We look at Brother Lawrence in his practice of the presence of God, and he had joined the monastery hoping to be whipped into shape a little bit because he saw himself as a dull and stupid, clumsy guy. And so he was like joining the spiritual military to get boot camp and get himself straightened out. And he said he was so disappointed because God did nothing but shower him with favor upon favor. And he kept waiting for the second shoe to drop and realized it was never going to drop, that's the nature of God. How can I forget you, who have condescended to remember me, even when I was on the verge of being lost because of my sins? You have shown me your mercy beyond all my hope. You've covered everything way, when you just more than I ever imagined you would have covered, and restored me to your grace and friendship far beyond anything I deserved. What return can I make to you for so great a favor? And again, I just emphasize that is the battery of spiritual life. It's not, we are not in this to get realization, to get to heaven, to see God. It's not a getting, it's not a clawing after something. If it is, we're just going to be running, we're caught in an eddy, and we're going to get caught in that little whirlpool off to the side until we figure that out. We're just going to sit there and kind of run. The thing that takes us forward is the experience of the divine in the moment and the inspiration to love that comes from that. The gratitude that comes from knowing, as your faith grows and your experience of the presence grows, that joy, that natural joy, that natural uplifting inside, because of what's made available for you. It is not granted to all persons to abandon the world and to lead a solitary life in your service, right? So not everybody can do that, because we would all starve then. So Mother has worked it out so that we're all symbiotic in our relationship with each other and with God. So it's not granted to all persons to abandon the world and to lead a solitary life in your service. Actually, it is no great thing for me to serve you, for every creature is bound to serve you. What really amazes me is that you admit into your service such an unworthy one as I, and make me one with your chosen servants. That humility, that awareness, that is also what grace does. Grace allows you to be honest. It allows you to be clear in the way that you see yourself. You don't have to be pretentious. You don't have to push your thoughts behind you and hide them. That you can be exactly as you are. You can speak freely because you realize that very important fact that we've shared many times, that your value does not come from your service, from your doings, from your abilities. Your value is default because God loves you, because God sees something of infinite value within you. That's your value, you know, that is your knowing. Nothing has to be proved, nothing has to be demonstrated. You are worthwhile and beautiful as a person because you carry within you that divine image, you know, that absolute unchanging Satchitananda, always constant, always present.
You
And
know,
that is, what's
I
that?
I always think of, in the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, where he's talking about Holy Mother, and he says
Uh,
it's your birthright.
yes, exactly.
So don't be afraid to ask Mother. She's your mother, and you're her child, and it's your birthright.
Absolutely true. Absolutely true. She gives that. We just read that this Monday. You know, Mother says that, you know, if you call me Mother, or not in the Mother class, that was actually the Tuesday night gospel class, where Thakur's challenging her for having that woman who wasn't quite leading an upright life carry his meal. And he says, how could you have let her bring that food to me? She's an immoral woman. And Mother says, well, first of all, you have to understand that you're the God of everybody, not just the pure people. And Ramakrishna really appreciated that challenge, accepted that, and he ate the food. And then she also said, and then he wanted her to promise not to do it again. And she says, I can't promise that. If someone calls me mother, I cannot say no. You know, I cannot say no. And so if we approach the divine as mother that way, you know, we can have that faith. We can know this is our mom, this is our mother, and she will indeed grant everything necessary, all that is needed. I don't think I ever understood that as well as I do these days. For the heavens and the earth, which you have created for our use, are ready day by day to carry out your commands. You have also appointed your angels to serve our needs. And as if this were not enough, you stoop to serve us yourself, promising to give yourself to us. And not only promising, but he has. We have no existence without the Lord's existence. We don't have Satchitananda without the Lord. That is the Lord. So he has placed that presence within us. He has given himself to us. You know, it's definitely not a promise to give himself to us. It's a done deal. He is our very existence, our very breath, our very being. His intelligence runs our mind. His love runs our heart. You know, motivates our life, moves us forward. And this idea of appointing the angels and that all of creation is put forward for us. And we begin to see that this unfolds as we grow in spiritual life, because you come to realize that everything is pointing at the divine. At the beginning, it seems like everything's pulling you away because you see everything as separate from God. You see everything as being beautiful in and of itself. You know, so like when we went up to the mountains and you're seeing these beautiful mountains, you know, when you see that beauty and you attribute it to the mountain, to the object, you want to own the object. You want to take the object down the mountain with you. You're afraid to leave it. But when you understand that that mountain is merely a representation, not of its own majesty, not of its own beauty, but of the beauty that is being reflected in you at that very moment. You know, we've talked about the fact that things do not exist out there. Things exist in our mind. That mountain, we don't know what exists out there. You know, we see it, but it doesn't come in through the eyes. You know, we just get that optical information, that biochemical zeros and ones, if you will. And then the mind creates the mountain to show to the self, right? So that beauty of that mountain, that majesty of the mountain is your own. It's the beauty of that light of awareness. It's that beauty of the presence being reflected in mind. And we ascribe that to the mountain. But when we grow and understand, no, that mountain is reflecting the glory of what is behind it, the beauty of God. And that is within you. That way you don't have to, take all the mountains home. You can leave some there for someone else. And you can always appreciate that beauty within, because that is what our practice reveals to us. The beauty of everything we've seen outside, we come to know it is the very beauty of our inside, of the chapel within. And now, what shall I give you in return for these innumerable blessings? Right? This is where renunciation comes from. You let go of everything else because you need nothing else. You want nothing else. Oh my God, if only I could serve you all the days of my life, or if only for one day to be able to serve you faithfully, for you are worthy of all honor, all service, and all praise forever. This is definitely someone with a bhakti heart going on here. But that's it. That's it. That's why Thakur says the fastest way to God is to sing his glories, sing his name and his glories. Just sit there and just keep your mind stewing in how beautiful it is to be alive, to experience, to grow, to think, to be, and to have this infinite divine potential within that allows us for becoming blank material.
If you think about it, it's really your own reflection that sends you into samadhi.
Oh, absolutely. Well, samadhi is you realizing there's no you. Samadhi is so we will never have samadhi. People don't have samadhi. God has samadhi. Because the people, that's what samadhi is. You lose yourself.
But you understand, it's like your own purity of mind reflecting back to the Atman, or to the self.
Yeah, the removal of egoism. Yeah. There's no block there. And then you just see the pure love. You see the pure wisdom. You see the pure being.
Because early on, like, let's say if I meditated on my Diksha guru, who I adore, and I thought it was, coming from that side.
Uh-huh.
Until, I realized, no, it's coming from you. It's your own heart and pure mind that is taking you there. It's not coming from outside.
No, that's true. That's true. And we even go one step farther. We become it itself. Samadhi, we're no longer an experiencer. We're no longer a witness. We are the thing itself. And we have no center at that point. We have no particular at that point. What Vivekananda describes us, he says that we are a point with an infinite circumference, whereas God is an infinite number of centers with an infinite circumference. So there's no particularization in samadhi. We at that point cease to be a particular. We're no longer a person or a personality, an attachment to a body mind. We know ourselves. Even when Ramakrishna had that first samadhi, that first realization, he was no longer Ramakrishna. We see him that way. The people around him saw him that way because they saw a body and they saw a mind and they thought, oh, there he is. He's back. But he was never Ramakrishna again after that. That's why he could check out anytime, because he knew that this is not, I do not have. That's why he referred to himself, this place, those who come to this place. He knew that this had no relationship to an I, to him. He was everybody. He could be anybody in the room. He was everybody in the room simultaneously. He was everything, everywhere, all at once. You are my Lord and my God, and I am your poorest servant, bound to serve you with all my strength, to never grow weary of praising you. This is my desire. This I implore you, that I may always praise you, and that you will supply whatever is wanting to me, whatever is necessary, whatever is missing. It's interesting, Vivekananda kind of pokes fun at us, to the Christian tradition, a little bit about this constant praising of God, this constant worshiping of his glory and his greatness. You know, he makes the statement, those who love greatness worship greatness. It's like in our relationship with the divine, that praise, it's not going to be objectified like that. It's just going to be it's just going to be an opening of the mouth in awe, just like you won't be able to say anything because there is absolutely nothing to be said. You know, the mind will still, the body will still, and that love will well up and push out of all the bounds. And you will just sit there unable to process anything in that moment. You are simply becoming pure awareness. And it's an awareness of pure love, awareness of pure wisdom, an awareness of the eternal being, eternal isness outside of time. And there is nothing, there is no movement there. You can't, because you're in ecstasy. You can't, because you're falling infinitely in love, one moment after another, ever deeper. And because you're loving an infinite love, you will fall in love more every moment for all of eternity if you did stretch it out on a timeline. But it's happening all at once because it's outside of time. And so the wonder of it is amazing, absolutely beautiful. It is a great honor to serve you and to despise all things for love of you. Those who freely give themselves to your holy service will receive great grace. You know, this despise, the Christians like that word too. And really it's because they want to draw an intense distinction between any gratification that can come from the world in comparison to the gratification that comes from the Lord. Even if it doesn't mean that you hate these things, like, oh, I hate my tablet now because I love God. No, it's not like that. It's that the love that this entails, or the love that this world can give, the love that we experience at this level, in comparison to the love of God, it is despising. It's the same as despising something, because the distance between that and pure love is the same distance between love and hating something, despising something in this world at the level that we live in here. So we despise all things for the love of you, meaning we have no interest in them. We don't focus and say, oh, I hate that thing. It's like we absolutely, completely obliterate that thing from our reality. We just don't even give it a thought. You know, that's despising. It's not that we look at it and just continually hate the thing. It's that we found the treasure. We have touched that which fills every pore of our body in an ecstatic love. What else could we possibly look at? What else could we possibly need, is what he's saying here. You know, to despise everything for the love of you, freely giving myself to your holy service, right? Because of this constant reception of grace, this constant pouring of grace. They will find the comfort of the Holy Spirit with all of its sweetness, who, for love of you, have renounced all carnal pleasures. They who for your name's sake enter upon the narrow way, laying aside all worldly business, will have great spiritual freedom. O happy and joyful service of God, which makes us free, makes us holy. O holy state of religion, which makes us like the angels, pleasing to God, feared by evil, and edifying to all the faithful. Such service is worthy to be desired and embraced, which earns for us the greatest good and a joy that will never end. Yes. If you're going to write a book about God, this is how it sounds. This is exactly how it sounds. Yes. All right. Chapter 11. So chapter 11 is on the need to examine and moderate the desires of the heart. All right. Christ is saying, my child, you still have many things to learn, which you have not yet learned well. Disciple, what are these things, Lord? Christ, that you conform your desires and affections to my good pleasure, that you be not full of self-love, but a zealous follower of my will in all things, right? And he's talking again from an egoistic perspective. This is how you would talk about it. But in actuality, as the egoism in us diminishes, we come to realize that our will is God's will, that we are one and the same being, that we are not separate. And so as our attachment to body drops off, then the needs and desires of the body begin to fade. And when the needs of the body begin to fade, and as through our detachment to mind, its own desires and moods begin to fade. And what replaces them? Nothing replaces them. What happens is that the light of love, God's will, God's heart, God's mind, begins to be able to express, because it's not being overshadowed by our egoism anymore. That light isn't being blocked by our wall of egoism, our fence that we've hedged around ourselves to create a world where we are in charge. And so this self-love, which is egoism, that diminishes, and then flowing in to fill that space, or actually becoming apparent because the shadow is gone, is the light of that equanimous, infinite love of our divine nature that God has placed there, that image of himself or herself. So this is what he says. This is so from the other side, from the side of egoism moving forward, you would say, let me conform my desires and affections to your good pleasure. That's what it looks like. That's what the experience of it is from egoism. But in actuality, it is the diminishment of egoism that is now harmonizing our existence with the divine existence, so that the divine will and our will become one. And then what happens is it looks like the world begins to obey us, right? Like Ramakrishna, when he wanted to build a fence around the Panchavati, all he did was think about it, and suddenly washing up on the shore, everything that was necessary for building that fence washed up on the beach of the Ganges. And we think, ooh, miracle, miracle. Well, no, I mean, that perspective can be had. But Vivekananda says there are no miracles. Everything within this world follows and obeys the laws of God. But what it is that you're beginning to have the same thought as the universal thought, because your egoism, your separateness is diminishing. And so you actually begin to think as the universe thinks. You actually have the mind of the universal mind. And so the universe is carrying on as it does, as it always does. And since you're in perfect harmony with it, you are being fulfilled equally. It seems like everything you ask for is being given to you. But in fact, you're just in alignment with the universe, the nature of the universe. And so you're moving as it moves. So there's that beautiful harmony. There's no longer that discord of egoism, the separation. God over there, I'm here. World out there, I'm here. That kind of thing. So this is what he means by that: conforming your desire and affections to my good pleasure, that you may not be full of self-love, of egoism, right? Self-love is that egoism, but a zealous follower of my will in all things, because without egoism, God's will is your will. There's no difference. I understand well how desires may sway you this way or that, but you should consider whether you are moved mainly for my honor or for your own interests. And the Vedantic way of understanding this is when he says, I understand how well my desires sway you this way and that way. We've mentioned in the past how when you go into your inner world and you go in there and begin paying attention to how it's functioning in there, you begin to realize that all desires come from either body or the mind. Have a desire, think of a desire, think of something you want, and then ask yourself, is this a desire that's coming from the body, or is this a desire coming from the mind? Because the self, the sacred self, never has a desire. It's eternally content with things exactly as they are. God everywhere present, always perfect. That's the experience of life. right? So he says, I understand how in the state of delusion, in the state of egoism, that we're pulled this way and that way and swayed constantly by the desires of our body and our mind because of our attachment to them. What is that attachment again? It's identifying with them. It's thinking that the body is my body. It has something to do with me. It describes me. It's attachment to the mind, to the personality. That's my personality. That's who I am. That's how I act. That's what I say. That's what I think. That's all attachment. We're trying to become that observer, that fresh observer, new in every moment, free of the narratives and story of cause and effect that is the karma of mind. To be free from that, right? He says, but you should consider whether you are moved mainly for my honor or for your own interests. It's like, are you allowing that divine presence within you, that Satchitananda, are you allowing it to inspire you to your action? Or are your interests coming from body and mind, the things that are causing you to clutch and grab, are motivating you to get and hold, right? If I am the cause, you will be at peace, whatever I do with you, right? If I am the cause, if what you are doing is from the presence of God, is from that Satchitananda within you, then you will be at peace. Your life will be fulfilled because you're acting according to your nature. You're acting according to that divine presence, and you're beginning to see it more and more everywhere all the time. And it's just continually overwhelming for you. But if self-interest, okay, if the interest of the body and interest of the mind is your motive, this will hinder you and drag you down, right? Because the body and mind don't necessarily want sacred things. They want selfish things because they are particularized. They are separate from the whole and see themselves as separate from the whole. Be careful, therefore. Do not rely too much on your own desire without consulting me, right? The consulting me, what a strange way to put it, but yes, it's that communion in the presence of the divine nature. It's being aware of this love of God that just cannot be separated from you. It's only you stop noticing it. Be careful, therefore, and do not rely on your own desire without consulting me. So bring everything into dialogue. We talked about that a little bit this morning. Just
not consulting, it's recognition.
Well, yeah. It is. It's odd that they choose these words, but consulting. Okay, so suddenly you feel like you've hired a computer engineer for your whole network, but
kind of like remembering that you're in constant contact with God, even when you forgot.
that's it. That's exactly what he's going for there. Be always there. Don't do anything without consulting your nature. Don't do anything without a conversation with the Divine Mother, with God, with the beloved, however you view that in your relationship. So be careful. Don't rely on your own desire without consulting me, because I'm the harmonizer.
You know what I'm finding? If you're not the doer, you don't have to ask. You don't have to consult.
No, that's true. But that's the highest state. We have to be careful about that, because if that's the case, there's realization is there. To know oneself to be not the thinker, to know oneself to not be the doer, that's an extremely, extremely high state. We get those ideas. I'm not questioning you in that, Ray. I'm just saying, be careful about those claims, because an I wouldn't make those claims if the I was at that level of
I
consciousness.
understand that. But
Yeah.
the thing is, if we always talk in the ultimate, then we can't talk. There
Right.
is conversation.
All right. What a beautiful thing that would be. No, that is exactly right. And quite often I will just start chuckling or giggling sometimes when we're talking about these things, because it always comes to mind. It's like these things can't be said. The essence of the things we're trying to describe do not fit in words. This is an exercise in vanity, right? And yet here we are, for the play of Mother, trying to talk about the things that cannot be talked about, trying to describe things that cannot be described, trying to reach for something that we already have, trying to be what we already are.
To me, it's all, I just take it all as a victory lap.
Yeah, no, it's the divine
Or
show.
I mean, because it's you've already it's not a process of gaining or
No,
collecting.
no,
It's just it's more of a process of realizing it's already there.
exactly.
Just haven't realized you're coming out of turn 4 on a victory lap.
That's why they call it realization, because it's like, oh my God, I've always been this. How did I not see this? How did I not know this? Right? This was,
It's like when you come out of meditation and you hear yourself saying, "Mother, it was all you. It was always you." And you really come out and you're saying it, and it's like,
yeah, well, you're saying it. And mother's like, well, if that's true, then who's talking to me?
the person that came out of meditation is no longer in that high of a plane.
Yes, indeed. So don't make any move without the awareness of the presence, right? Without an awareness of that Satchitananda. All right. So do not rely too much on your own desire without consulting me, lest perhaps you regret it later on. All right. Because anything that comes not from divine inspiration, but from the clawing of the body mind, it always brings karma with it. Always brings karma with it. And with every little bit of pleasure you eke out of the body mind, the equal amount of suffering is waiting to follow. Behind every wave is the lull, Vivekananda says. There's a balance in this world. There's equal amounts of pleasure and pain. And so if you try to dip in and take some drugs to experience some ecstasy, that's fine. But beware, there's a hell behind that ecstasy. When that drug wears off and you're left without it, then you experience the lull, the depth, the hole that you dug, the debt that you created by stealing some bliss from the material. You're going to regret it later on. So lest perhaps you regret it later on and be dissatisfied with what pleased you at first, right? Because that's the nature of this entire world, right? Is that not the nature of your desires? You go smell that rose. Oh my God, that's beautiful. You smell it immediately a second time. It's just not quite as fantastic as it was the first time. You smell it again. You can barely smell it. Fourth and fifth time, you can't smell the rose anymore. I read this horrible article on coffee, in National Geographic. And it said that, when you take that bit of that first cup of coffee, I'll say dopamine, but I don't know if it was dopamine that they were talking about. It raises the levels of the mind and you get that kick. You get that wonderful kick. They said after 2 weeks, you have to have that cup of coffee just to maintain normal levels of what your body used to maintain when you didn't drink coffee at all. And so to get that kick, now you have to have 2 cups of coffee to get the kick. Right. And then 2 weeks later after that, you've got to have 3 cups of coffee. And I used to know a devotee in San Francisco. He was up to 8 cups of coffee a day to maintain that kick. And then the next time I talked to him, he had quit it altogether. See, that's exactly the process. We go into the world, we try these things, we run after these things, and through discernment, we learn we've taken a wrong turn, we renounce and come back, Not every inclination which appears to be good and holy should be followed at once. On the other hand, neither is every undesirable inclination hastily to be rejected. Right? He says, so don't be shallow. That's really what he's saying. Don't be shallow. Be aware. Look at things carefully. Understand their nature. Understand what they give and what they take. And it's all very obvious. The scriptures were written just by observing the moment. The scriptures were written by being aware in the moment. And so you too, by being aware in this moment, can suss out what should be pursued and what should be avoided. Right? Sometimes it is well for people to restrain those inclinations and desires, good in themselves, lest through impulsiveness they become distracted in mind, or an obstacle to the spiritual progress of others, or again, through the opposition of others, become disturbed and fall, right? So through impulsiveness, that's when you're driven by the patterns of wrong thinking, right? Bad habits that you've developed over time. When you start doing them, and you can't not do them anymore because you've just been doing them all the time. When you try and stop them, even though it's good for you to stop them, the mind gets all cranky and bent out of shape. You know, when you stop drinking coffee, when you renounce coffee, oh, that mind's get a big old headache. You know, you're going to sit there, it's going to bring that idea of coffee up into your mind at least 10 times a day. And you're just going to be sitting there miserable, like, oh my God. But by the third day, you're feeling great. You know, you realize you didn't need that cup of coffee at all. Now the body's back in its rhythm. The levels are back to their normal state. All is going on. So through impulsiveness, you become distracted in your mind, right? You start running after these things that don't give you anything. You're just going to have to keep running after them. That's being distracted in mind. You're running after thoughts. You're running after ideas. You're no longer present in the moment. You're no longer aware of the moment and the beauty of the moment and the contentness of the moment and the peace and the stillness within in that moment. Lest through impulsiveness, they become distracted in mind or an obstacle to the spiritual progress of others, right? You start becoming the friend they call to go out and be distracted with. They ask you questions and you can't give a spiritual answer. You give answers based on the impulse of body mind. And things that are pleasant to the body start to look like they're good things, naturally good things. Of course, you should do those things. They're good for the body, you know. But in actuality, they're not good for the soul, and that's what you are, right? And again, through the opposition of others, become disturbed and fall. Just that egoism. Becoming bothered by others, becoming disturbed because you're focused on body mind. You're concerned about protecting the needs and the desires of body and mind. And every other person out there is competing for the same desires of body and mind. And so you start liking some people and disliking others and imagining stories of hatred around you everywhere. And you become disturbed and you fall. You fall from your platform of love, that platform, the high consciousness, the high state of being aware of the presence of the divine within you. You fall. There are times when we must use violence and courageously resist our sensual appetite, right? That's why Kali has the heads of all your demons hanging around her neck. There does come a time when you have to go to battle and you have to fight your attachments. That's what the whole Gita is about. Kurukshetra. That's your body, mind. And the battle is going on right now. That famous battle in the Bhagavad Gita is happening at this very moment. And you're sitting in your chariot, the body, and Krishna, God, is in this body with you. And you're there with him. And you're looking at the mind, the field of action. And you're seeing all the things you're attached to, all the things you're like, just like Krishna was looking out, or not Krishna, but Arjuna was looking out and seeing his relatives and his teachers and his friends and the people he grew up with all on the enemy's side. And he grows faint in heart. This is what happens to us. We sit here and we look at our ice cream and we look at money and beautiful people. And we're like, oh my God, how am I ever going to renounce and slay these things, slay these desires? How will I ever do it? You get weak-kneed, I can't. Oh, how difficult this is. And Krishna turns to you and says, they're already dead. Your body will fall. They will fall with it. Everything has already happened. Do not see a loss in this, Arjuna.
That's my rebuttal to vegetarians.
Now. But yes, so there are times when we must use violence, when that time for renunciation comes. Look at what Thakur did, that last act of renunciation. He had to renounce the Holy Mother, not Sharda, but the Divine Mother, right? When he was with, I think it was when he was studying with, was it Totapuri, I think. And Totapuri, Ramakrishna can't push past that last thing. And Totapuri pushes a piece of glass into his forehead, says, focus here. go, and Ramakrishna goes, and Mother was blocking the path. The Divine Mother was standing there, and Ramakrishna pulls out the sword of discrimination and slices her in half. And he goes into samadhi for 6 months, lays there motionless for 6 months. They have to push rice and milk into his mouth. So there is a time when we have to pull out that sword of discrimination and slice mercilessly through the things that we love the most, the things that we are most attached to. And we have to leave them, because those are our sensual appetites. They are the things that tie us to the body, tie us to the mind, that trap us in time, that put us under the weight of karma. Having no regard for the likes and dislikes of the flesh, right? So we have to come to that state. We're not concerned about the body anymore, because we know that is not who we are. Last night in that tank, in that tank, I was continually going, identifying everything that was happening in my inner space there, and looking at it, becoming holding it very carefully in my mind, and then saying, that is mind. I am not the mind. And I would take an imaginary step back, and I would feel those sensations again. I would collect them all together again, and I would say, that is mind. I am not the mind. I would step back again. This is that battle. This is that battle constantly. It is not me. Cut the line. Cut the communication. Cut the attachment, the identity. So there are times when we must use violence and courageously resist our sensual appetite, having no regard for the likes and dislikes of the flesh, of the body, but rather making sure that the body, despite its protests, becomes subject to the spirit, right? Because that's what it is. There's a step down. You got God. You got that subtle body. You got mind, mind's, I can't remember the whole order. Mind, subtle body, and then the body is the grossest manifestation out there. And if they're all aligned, if you know that body comes from spirit, if body comes from mind comes from spirit, when you know that, everything stays in the proper order. When you think you're the body, you put it up where spirit should be, right? And spirit's not even in the picture, because you can't even imagine that you're spirit. And then mind, and everything's out of whack. The mind cries for this and you run. The body cries for this and you run that direction, all around. So you have to make all of these subject to your spirit. What is your spirit? Satchitananda. So you make sure that the body is manifesting pure love, manifesting pure wisdom in its being. It must be chastised, right? And compelled to serve. Well, okay. He's using that language, that kind of language again. It will come into harmony itself in the presence of God, of the divine. We look at Brother Lawrence, and just if you manage to hold on to that presence, to the awareness of God all the time, then the body will come into harmony, because its nature is to be subject to spirit. That's when the body is actually the happiest.
The word compelled is troubling to me.
Yeah. And that means just through discernment. We use different words, but the idea is the same. They just like to amp up the intensity of these words a bit. It must be chastised and compelled to serve until it is ready to obey in all things what the soul commands. Well, it will be very happy when it does that, because that's the nature of it, right? You're going to be happier because finally the senses are no longer driving the chariot. You are. And until it learns to be content with little, to delight in simple things, and not to complain at any inconvenience, right? Because our joy comes from the presence. Our satisfaction comes from the presence. And we have learned, we have seen and experienced that the love and joy of God cannot be matched by any of the things we used to long for, that we used to desire. And in time, we get it. And we drop the bad habit of running after things that barely exist. All right. So we'll stop there for this evening. Oops, there. I almost ended the meeting for everybody.